Bully is perhaps one of the best Rockstar games you may have never played in your life. This open map game, released in 2006, follows the journey of a badly behaved Jimmy Hopkins as he's transferred into Bulworth Academy, a boarding school known for keeping its children's noses clean.
You keep that nose clean, boy, or I shall clean it myself.
And being a place where students, teachers and staff treat each other with the respect that they deserve. The thing is though, that Rockstar is known for its absolute domination in the open map, story-driven, chaos-inducing games like GTA and the Red Dead series, but Bully has comparatively gone somewhat under the radar. Not enough though for 2013 me to absolutely play the living daylight out of this game, but fast forward 10ish years and I haven't touched the game since. However, in that time I ended up finishing my final year at university, where I took a paper that delved deep into bullying, and I thought, how does this real life research add up in the world of bully? Therefore I fired up the game and replayed the whole story mode from start to finish in the name of science. So, is this game able to truly capture the complexity of bullying? Does decades of research into bullying match what is going on in the world of Bulworth? And be sure to stick to the very end to find out whether Jimmy Hopkins really is a bully.
Not bad, Pete. Not bad at all. Alright. See you around. Wait, Jimmy, can I come too? You know what? Don't worry about it.
Of course, before we start, I just want to say that we don't need research to tell us that bullying negatively impacts everyone that is involved, no matter whether that's physical, verbal, online, or any other form. So if you feel like you are yourself struggling with this, then I'll add some links in the description that you may find helpful in dealing with these difficult situations. Stay strong and things will be better. So to really understand how our protagonist, Jimmy Hopkins, makes a name for himself at Bulworth, we need to look at how bullying culture manifests at this school. So to do that, we need to answer the obvious question: what is bullying? Well, bullying can take many forms and sometimes can be difficult to notice. But to make things easier for researchers, they tend to define it on a few criteria. Bullying can be defined as aggressive intentional acts carried out by a group or an individual repeatedly and over time against a victim who cannot easily defend themselves. But not all aggressive behaviour is bullying, right? I mean, just because I catapult my controller through my window doesn't mean I'm bullying my Xbox controller. Therefore, 3 criteria are considered relevant in order to define aggressive behaviour as bullying. Number 1, repetition. Number 2, intentionality. And number 3, an imbalance of power. Wait, now that I'm thinking about it, I might actually be bullying my Xbox controller. Oh well, it deserves it anyways. Bullying is also typically unprovoked and deliberate, and therefore can be considered a subtype of proactive, goal-directed aggression, but more about this fancy sounding stuff later. Studies show that in an age range similar to the one found at Bulworth, bullying rates are around 5 to 15%. However, other researchers report that approximately 20 to 25 of young people are directly involved in bullying, and to further complicate the matter, large-scale studies suggest that between 9 to 25% of school-age children are bullied. So it's clear that the estimates of who does the bullying and who is the victim of the bullying can vary a lot. Therefore, I decided to take matters into my own hands and to investigate the rates of bullying at Bulworth Academy. I will take this route around the school, making sure to avoid the dog. And I will record the amounts of bullying type behaviours either Jimmy personally experiences or what we can observe happening to others. To be extra scientific here, I will also do this a few times and create a little average score for this to truly be the height of empirical research. Just in the span of around 30 seconds, an average of 2 physical attacks and at least 1 verbal attack was made on Jimmy whilst innocently skipping around the school, whereas an average of 1.2 physical and 1.6 verbal instances were found of this stuff happening to other people. So as you can see, Bulworth has quite high rates of bullying type behaviour, and especially for some reason when I wore my favourite outfit.
Hey look, the circus is in town.
But besides that, there is something seriously going wrong at this school for there to be such high rates of malpractice. However, when doing my own investigations, the stuff that I was coming across was not far from what the research shows us. It seemed that bullies in Bulworth chose their targets as well as the time and place for the attacks that maximizes their chances of demonstrating their power to their peers. People are usually being bullied in high density areas like right outside the school or outside classrooms where many students could see it happen. Stuff like deviancy training also took place while whilst casually skipping around Bulworth. This consists of verbal and non-verbal cues of acceptance of bullying behaviour. This was further reinforced by the idea of pluralistic ignorance. Pluralistic ignorance refers to a situation when group members, like the nerds, privately reject the norm, for example the nerds rejecting the idea of bullying and want it to stop, but at the same time believe that others accept it. Now, I intentionally called these individuals nerds, not because I am myself a bully, but because this game works on stereotypical factions, like the ones found in your typical American high school film.
Have you ever actually met anyone named Muhammad?
Have you actually ever met anyone named McLevin?
Just to name a few in this game, you have your jocks, big-bodied but small-brained, your bullies, well, I guess they do the bullying, your preps, rich, stuck up and heavily into their first cousins,
Because first cousins is legal, my friend. Legal.
and some other groups like the greasers and the townies, which you can imagine what they stand for.
What was it called? Grottos and Gremlins or something like that?
Of course, not forgetting the previously mentioned nerds, and to best describe them, the video will end as soon as they say something with unmeasurable amounts of cringe.
Yo, Jimmy! I'm over here! Give me 5, dude!
No.
What all these factions have in common is that they all engage in a form of bullying against other groups. In other words, bullying together. Whether that's the nerds against the jocks or the preps versus the greasers, they all seem to collectively come together to achieve a common goal, bullying their enemies. Funnily enough, this is what researchers propose to create a sense of belonging within a group. Bullying people outside your group not only makes the outgroup people feel smaller and weaker, but simultaneously it strengthens the bonds you have within your own group. So where does Jimmy belong in all of this? Well, to not spoil too much of the story, slight spoiler warning incoming, Jimmy initially doesn't belong anywhere. He starts his Bulworth journey dropped off by his mum and new stepdad just before they are set to go on their honeymoon. Yet it seems that there is no time to waste with giving Jimmy a proper send-off, as they seem like they want to get rid of him as soon as possible, almost forgetting the fact that it's his first day at a brand new school. Just from this little sequence at the start of the game, we can see why Jimmy Hopkins would already be fitting the criteria of a bully. Research shows us that bullies tend to perceive their parents as authoritarian, punitive, and unsupportive. Of course, we can't be sure what Jimmy thinks about his parents, but chucking your son off at school and dipping as soon as possible doesn't really seem like the most supportive thing to do. Furthermore, bullies also tend to report less family cohesiveness than other children, and unfortunately for Jimmy, we know that this holds true for him, as he mentions this in one of the cutscenes.
They're just waiting for my mother to come back from her 58th honeymoon, then I'm out of here.
So Jimmy is dumped into an environment where bullying grows quicker than damp on an old Victorian house, with nothing but his past experiences of getting kicked out of schools and his rather impressive list of crimes.
Vandalism, graffiti, bad language, violent conduct, disrespecting staff. Oh, I'm scared of you, Hopkins.
This paired with the fact that Jovan and Ho show that during the transition to a new middle school, students who perceived bullies as high status children were likely to show increases in their bullying behaviour over time. Therefore, it's obvious that the odds are stacked quite highly against Mr. Jimmy Hopkins being a model student at Bulworth Academy. Thankfully though, he meets these two characters, Gary and Petey, who show him round the school and almost mentor him into the Bulworth way. Gary himself takes a more active role in showing Jimmy around the school and introduces him to all the factions. In fact, one of the first factions that Jimmy takes an interest in helping is one that is unlikely to receive help from a bully. In the early stages of the game, you almost play as a mercenary for the nerds in their struggle against the bullies.
$2? Are you crazy? Make it 5.
Many of the missions consist of terminating bullies and assisting the nerds in their quests.
Cover me! I'm going in!
Perhaps a reason for why Jimmy does this is because it gains him popularity and money, even if that's with an unpopular group. With every mission you complete throughout this game, you tend to gain respect from the group you helped, as well as a bit of cash on the side. So I guess it doesn't really matter if you're doing that for an unpopular group, you've got to start somewhere, right? I mean, studies have shown that aggressive children, including bullies, can be perceived as cool, powerful, and popular, so it doesn't seem like a bad idea to start small and work your way up. With that said, this is exactly what underlines Jimmy's story all throughout his time at Bulworth, starting small and making your way up to the top. This is perhaps unsurprising, as bullies really do value dominance, and getting people to respect you is a good way of asserting your dominance on them further down the line. Furthermore, Jimmy always seems to be wanting to be the leader of something and almost not stopping at any length to get there. And if you've played even a little bit of the story, you know what I mean. Some researchers found that the child's probability of being a bully was related to a high degree of status goals, especially among adolescent males. It's clear that Jimmy really values the status of a leader, otherwise he wouldn't do the stuff he does to get to those positions. But the thing is, Jimmy does not always venture alone in these quests for power and dominance. He has a few people along the way that aid him to do this. One of those individuals is this guy, PT. Now, PT, bless him, he's not the most popular person in Bullworth.
Because you're weird. Weird? Look at you. You've got a weak bladder.
In fact, he's a clear victim of bullying perpetrated by the other person that Jimmy is guided by, Gary. The interaction between Gary and PT in the early stages of the game shows what Mr. Aurelius describes as gradual cognitive changes in the perceptions of the victim. Gary, since the start of the game, perceives PT as,
ladies and gentlemen, I give you Femboy, the girliest boy in school. Actually, I think I'm gonna go cry. That'd be just like you. Do you like watching the girls in their swimming costumes? Does that fuel your filthy little fantasies?
Gary, just get out of the way.
which further reinforces PT's place as a victim of bullying. Because, well, in the eyes of the bully, if you are those things, then you deserve to get bullied, right? Now, we don't know much about PT's upbringings and home environment, but if I had to guess based on the research, then I would guess that PT would describe his home environment as overprotective, as a meta-analysis found support for overprotection being strongly related in being a victim of bullying. Nevertheless, Jimmy, regardless of knowing PT's social standing within the school, remains a close friend, and although their relationship is sometimes questionable,
Well, when you're done with this place, a career on the stage awaits. Maybe like a male stripper or something, huh? What?
they still support each other, and often Jimmy defends PT from potential bullying. This stuff is really nice to see because having protective friendships in a school context have been shown to buffer against further victimization.
But I want you to stop bullying weak kids.
Why?
Because there are a bunch of kids around this place who need a beating, and you're picking on the few who don't. So I want you to leave me and him alone.
Oh, okay.
Okay, let's now get into the real nitty-gritty of Mr. Jimmy Hopkins. But before we do that, I would highly recommend subscribing. This video took a very long time to make, and a sub, like, or both would be very much appreciated. If you don't, well, now that we know the environment, the type of people Jimmy is interacting with, and a bit about his past, we can see what kind of person Jimmy is at Bullworth Academy. Now, remember when I mentioned at the start of the video about proactive and goal-directed aggression? Well, this is where this stuff comes back into play. Back in the day of Crick and Dodge, these psychologists described bullies through a social skills deficit model, basically saying that aggressive children show difficulties in social information processing. For example, interpreting ambiguous situations in a more aggressive way. Did that person just say something to me with an attitude? Put them in the bin. Oh, what was that? Get in the bin. What did you say about my beloved mother? In the bin you go. Through this model, then, bullies are seen as simple, inaccurate processing machines and completely miss out their skills in social manipulation. Although Jimmy may seem like that sometimes, as when someone wrongs him, his initial reaction is obviously to politely shake their hand in disagreement.
Very clear, sir. You want me to kill Darby Harrington?
Very few studies confirm that Dodge's model can be applied to bullies. Therefore, this led researchers to conceptualize bullying as proactive aggression, meaning that the aggression displayed by the bully is proactively displayed in order to achieve a goal or task, just like how Jimmy is helping a fellow companion out right now. This then led in seeing bullies as not necessarily socially unskilled or emotionally dysregulated, but quite skillful in using bullying in order to achieve their goals. In fact, Jimmy does seem to be quite goal-orientated, and will use his aggression to get himself places. I mean, all of Jimmy's missions revolve around gaining respect, admiration, or money, and he will go to great lengths to achieve this, and we can clearly see that Jimmy uses bullying in order to achieve his goals. But unlike a typical bully who displays greater amounts of proactive aggression, Jimmy tends to display greater amounts of reactive aggression. This type of aggression is much more sporadic and uncalculated than proactive aggression, and understanding this, we can start to see how Jimmy no longer fits the description of just a pure bully. Of course, aggressive actions are not always obvious whether they are reactive or proactive, but bullies tend to be selective in their aggression, whereas Jimmy almost by default selects to react aggressively to most things. Bullies also tend to choose victims who are submissive, insecure of themselves, physically weak, and low in power. This is because, rather unsurprisingly, it enables bullies to repeatedly demonstrate their power to the rest of the group and renew their high status without fear of being confronted. So tell me why Jimmy decides to help the most submissive, perhaps most insecure, physically weak, and low in power group in the school. the nerds, and poor Petey. This type of helping the helpless behavior from Jimmy isn't rare either. He often displays behavior that demonstrates that he means to do the right thing and often defends individuals or even groups from potential bullies. Furthermore, bullies tend to choose their time and place for their attacks that maximizes the chances of demonstrating their power to peers. Now, although Jimmy does have a somewhat systematic approach to which group he takes on, his success in gaining respect would not be done so well if it wasn't for Petey and others advising how and when things should be done in order to maximize the rewards. Otherwise, if Jimmy had his way the whole time, he would go storming in headfirst and hope for the best. So you see, Jimmy doesn't completely fit the bill when it comes to a pure bully. Yes, he does bully some people. Yes, he is aggressive and has the markings of a bully. But there are many areas like the ones we just covered where Jimmy is an outlier. And a main contributor to why that is because Jimmy himself is a victim of bullying. Throughout the game and probably throughout his time in other schools, he experienced his fair share of bullying. These past experiences are what fueled Jimmy's reactive nature and his desire for control and status as a form of controlling his external environment. As when you are the leader, the one at the top, it's rare that people will pick on you. Call it a defense mechanism, if you will. In reality, well, at least the reality of bully, Jimmy is highly rejected by his peers and clearly shows signs of externalizing problems. Jimmy comes from an adverse home environment characterized by maltreatment and neglectful parenting. It would be very likely that Jimmy would also score highly on reactive and proactive aggression, and rather than being skillful and strategic like his friend Gary, Jimmy seems to be dysregulated and hot-tempered. All this combined is what makes Jimmy Hopkins not a bully, but instead a bully victim. Bully victims make a small amount of bullies, with studies showing that approximately 4 to 6% of children can be classified as bully victims. Bully victims are found to be the most dysfunctional and tend to suffer more from behavioural misconduct. Jimmy unfortunately seems to have a dysfunctional family with very little support systems in place, and has a history of, well, criminal activity that shows off his behavioural misconduct. As for peer relationships, Jimmy for a long time is viewed as a social outcast. Rarely finding a place within any of the factions, he is somewhat of a lone wolf, and even with the closest people to him, say someone like Petey, we can see that this isn't really a significant peer relationship. Overall, bully victims tend to be more dysregulated and more socially isolated than pure bullies, and when all this manifests in the environment like the one found at Bulworth, it is difficult to see the difference between the two. However, by classing Jimmy as not just a bully, but a bully victim, it is clear why he does the stuff he does. Jimmy is found to be in a constant cycle of trying to achieve dominance over people through bullying in order to avoid the ridicule he would get from others bullying him. He is oppressed by his very nature, and his constant seek for power and dominance only weakens his ability to make proper connections with others. Jimmy is not a bully. Instead, he's a bully victim, but also a victim of his own demise.